We're going to start today's Maine's future board meeting. It's January 30th, in case it's still in the middle of winter. And it seems like winter a little bit.
Yeah. Actually pretty nice out there.
Yeah. So we've got not too aggressive agenda this morning. We've got some stuff. So this morning, why don't we first start out with just a quick round of introductions, just for the board members here on the board. And then we'll go on. So
Yes, Kim Norris, public member from Winthrop.
amend my thing and have the staff, the new director, introduce yourself, in case anybody forgets.
Hello, I'm the new director.
Pat Kelleher, DMR, board chair.
Judy Camuso, IFW Commissioner.
Bob Meyer, public member from. Public member from Cliff Island.
We've got just one board member on. Catherine, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, Catherine Robbins Halstead, public member Searsmont, and you have Barbara on the phone also.
Barbara.
Yes, Barbara Trafton, public member from Brunswick.
Are you calling from a land far away, Barbara?
Right, I'm down on the Straits of Magellan. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's deal with a little bit of the housekeeping here.
I think Mac is on.
Mac is on?
Oh.
Mac, are you online?
Okay.
I'm not here, Mac. So if you do see him come in, just wave your hand at me. Just a little bit of housekeeping for the board members per diem forms, if you could remember to get those. And let's see. We have a new member of the LMF team. Where's Julia?
Julia.
Nice to meet you guys. Thank
Welcome aboard.
you.
All right, thank you. And if you need us to clarify anything during the meeting, just say, hey, what are you trying to talk about?
Okay, I will.
Okay, so you're getting there with staff, which is great.
One step forward.
Yeah,
one step back.
I'm gonna save the other part of the staffing conversation for later.
Okay, yeah. That's
Yeah,
aspirational.
this is why I have this, actually.
Gonna club me with that.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to item number 2, which is the September 28 and November 28 minutes. Do we have any?
I vote for accept. Oh,
We have a motion on the floor to accept both sets of minutes.
second that.
We have a second, so motion by Roger, seconded by Jim to accept the minutes from September 28 and November 28 meetings. Any questions or comments on the motion? Any objections to the motion, either online or in the room? Seeing none, hearing none, the motion passes. Great, excellent. Moving along then, let's get right to the LMF director introduction.
Thank you very much. And this is what I wanted to share with you. This is an org chart. You will see, maybe recognize it from our GEA report. I love this for 2 reasons. I think it places us both, it captures what I think my job is. And I like to, at the beginning of a new employment relationship, like check in and tell you what I think my job is and what I think how we are together. You'll see public service manager 2, that's me down there. You see I report to the director of BRILUP, who goes up to the commissioner of the ACF, up to the governor. And you'll see this bi-directional line between us, the board liaison. And you'll see you guys who are appointed by the governor directly. You'll notice I am not appointed by the governor, you are. And how I think my job, a big part of my job, is to be well connected to my betters, so to speak, to be fully aware of what state land acquisition policy is, also to listen to stakeholders, and to carry that information to you, facilitate your work. And you also are listening to stakeholders. You are communicating to me, and I take those communications that I learn from you back up the chain and out. And I say this because I want to make these things explicit. If you have a different idea of what my job is, I would love to hear it. But thank you. That's all I really wanted to do.
Great. I am excited to have Laura on board as our director. She's bringing kind of a new energy and focus, I think, to the board. I think clarifying that role and she clearly understands that relationship, not only to us, but to our constituents and partners, which is going to be critically important moving forward as we start to address some of these bigger issues. And making sure we've got that strong line of communication. So, any questions for Laura in her new role? I don't think anybody will hesitate to tell her when we don't think she's doing her role.
I'm not too worried about that. And nor should you hesitate. No, don't worry, I'll be telling you what I think too. That's not gonna be a problem.
Okay, if there's no other comments on that, we'll move right into item number 4, which is fund balances.
Yes, okay, and this you'll see, this month it is just the bond balances. Normally I have the LMF trust fund balance tallied and put in the bottom corner. Not this month. This month is just the bonds on this slide. I believe this is, in fact, this is as of December 31st. There were a couple of projects that came through, Talking Brook and Newly Farm, both pulled out. The last time you saw this balance, it was closer to 156,000, give or take. Those have cleared, and this is what's left as of December 31st. So you can see we're getting down there. These are our old 2009 and 2011 bond funds. Any questions about that? Yeah, okay, and here we have allocations. This is, okay, these are the funds we have currently allocated to projects you have chosen. These are not the funds we have expended. These are just the ones that are currently allocated to active projects. These include set-asides. So you can see we have 35 projects right now active in our pipeline, and we have allocated $15,519,218, give or take. And then we're going to go through each of our little sub-programs because I shouldn't say little sub-programs. They're big programs. The conservation and recreation, that was the $30 million initial allocation. The set-asides are taken off the top in this calculation, calculated at 15%. There is an agency MOU. Those allocations there are clear up because the set-asides are subtracted in total at the top. Those allocations are what are actual for, project acquisition costs. And then the expenditures are how many projects we have closed, the dollars out the door, what we have spent in the conservation and rec, leaving, and this is the important number as we look toward round 12, $6,208,043. Those are available funds for project acquisitions. Remember, we've taken the set-asides off, so we don't have to carve out a portion of that 6 million for set-asides. That's what we can spend on projects. Next slide. The same deal working with farmland. Same calculations, same set of calculations. We have 1.668 million. There's a little glare available for working farmland. Next slide. Working waterfront. We're going to be hopefully issuing a round request for proposals today. Right now, this is what we have allocated, $2,142,391. There is an additional $118,750 expected to come back into this fund with it set aside. So, well, forget that because the set asides are off the top. But another $118,750 expected to roll back in because we expect there's a project right now, Henry's Point. We expect the town of Jonesport to withdraw their application. They haven't done so formally. They want to pick a few more tires and check a few more boxes, but we fully expect that to come back. So the number will go up by that amount. Next slide. And water access, same set of calculations. There are two pending water access projects right now, the Back River and the Big Sand Beach. And the Getchell Park is the one that has closed. But you don't see that, you see $0 because Getchell Park closed using, I think, bond funds. All right, and are there any others? Did I cover them all? Yeah.
Can you go back one slide, please? Just nope, that's 2 slides. All right, yeah, that's water access. So is water access, that amount set aside by the board, remind me, is that a statutorily out?
That I believe is statutory from this 40 million.
Yeah.
I think our only discretionary pile was the CNR.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting down to superficials. And what's not, the thing that's too bad about the, not having the most updated trust fund balances, because what you don't see is the interest rolled into here. We have at least 300,000 in interest into the LMF trust fund that's not reflected in these numbers. And plus some, because there's more.
Since when?
Since the 300,000 is since, I guess, July, yeah. And then and so I don't know what we've earned since last time, because obviously as we draw down funds, there's not the same amount of. And so I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on that, but I don't have it.
Yeah, this is one of my pet peeves, right? This is interest earned on an account with very low interest rates. So we need to continue to talk about that at the administration level about how we might be able to change that. So,
Right.
okay. All right, I'm going to pause here for a second because I see Mac is online. Mac, could you just introduce yourself, please?
Yes, Matt Hunter from Amherst, Maine. Apologies for my being late. It was all cyber stuff.
We'll let it slide this time, Matt. So that all board, just for the record, all board members are present now, with the exception of Commissioner Beal, who was not able to attend. Okay, so any questions around any of the fund status? Seeing no hands in the room or online, then let's move right down to item number 6, which is the 2023 year in review.
Yes, indeed. And first you see, these are recently closed projects. That's since the last board meeting. Mostly these are the things. And then I think let's jump right into the year in review 2023. Here you go. We've been busy, 17 projects. We dispersed $6.7 million. We met at leverage almost $3 million at match. And what we have for you is a quick slideshow, depending on how quickly we advance. Jason or Fleur, do you want to read them as they come up? Because I don't need to do all the talking unless you're not feeling up to.
I would say maybe whoever.
Oh, yeah, the person who did
the project.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
East Grand Weston, yeah, the $1 million view. Keep going. Giza Corridor, Patterson Hill, yeah.
And Guston and Sabatis. Porter Hills Phase 1. North Deering Conservation Land in the heart of Portland.
Bear Brook Preserve, Heron Colony, I might add. Getchell Park Water Access. Caribou Stream Deer Wintering Area. Bonnie Bag Mountain. Deadwater Juniper Brook. East Wyndham Conservation Project. Edwards Mills phase of the Mill Hill Edward Mills project.
Muddy River Forest on the north side of Sebago.
Lexington Deer Wintering Area in Lexington Township. Wallamatogus Mountain Community Forest in Penobscot. Talking Brook Public Land.
And Newly Farm in Durham.
You guys can be proud. Yeah, it's pretty good.
We, as a board, we deal with volumes of funds that come in through bonds or through this here around, through general fund appropriations at different levels, but I can't think of a time where we've moved that many projects in that amount of time.
It's a lot.
That's great work. So kudos to staff, really. I mean, I think that really speaks a lot for the staff that we have on, even the one that's leaving. But that's
Yeah, I know.
Done this to me twice. I'm to take it further. Okay, well, unless there's any questions regarding.
But I do just want to follow up on your comments.
Yes, please.
In the past, there's been a lot of concern around how lengthy the LMF process is and sort of how arduous it could be. And I think for all the legislators that are paying attention. You know, I think the staff have really, and the board, of course, but it's really the staff that does the work, really shown that we can be efficient and nimble and productive, and promote really good projects and get them turned around in a very expeditious timeframe. That's a lot of work in, you know, what was it, 3 years?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think it speaks volumes about the quality of the applications we have coming in.
Yes,
Which is
yes.
critical, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the great work that the AOC has done in this time frame. I mean, you guys have streamlined that process.
Yes.
So you can't leave.
Starting to make plans.
It's true. It's true. Our land trust partners have really brought it to the
Yeah.
table in a
Yeah.
big way.
It's only been 2 years since
2 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
the funding was approved 2.5 years ago.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Even more.
if there's no other questions or comments on the year in review, let's get right into projects to be acted on.
Well, the first project, to be acted on today is the 3 Ponds 1 Forest project in Bremen, Lincoln County. And this project represents 403.9 acres pre-acquired by Coastal Rivers Conservation Trust with over a mile in combined frontage on McCurdy and Pemaquid ponds. Contains wetlands, vernal pools, and waterfowl and wading bird habitat. And as was discussed in the original board meeting where this project was selected, Coastal Rivers plans to site trails to connect to adjacent conservation lands on this property. So the AOC met on December 12th of 2023 to discuss the 3 appraisals for this project. The appraisals reported a combined value of $1.67 million, and the committee accepted this appraised value. Draft motion here.
Okay, any questions before we get into the motions? Any questions? Would anybody like to make a motion?
Yes, I would. I move to approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $1,760,000 combined.
Great, thank you, Bob.
Second that.
Don't really need a second.
Oh,
We have a
okay.
committee motion, but that's quite all right. Is there any questions around the motion? Any comments on the motion? Not seeing any hands online or in the room. Is there any objections to the motion on the table? I'm going to read it into the record one last time. It's a committee motion to approve the recommendations of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee to accept the appraised value of $1,760,000 combined. Is there any objections to the motion? Being no objections in the room or online with board members present, motion passes. Thank you.
Public notice for the 3 Ponds 1 Forest project was advertised in the Kennebec Journal on January 20th, 2024. No comments were received.
Great. Another draft motion from the board. Would anybody like to formalize that?
I move that we confirm the allocation of $608,000 in conservation and recreation funding to support the acquisition, subject to standard conditions.
Okay, can I second?
You can second this one if you'd like.
I second that.
Thank you, Jim. Motion by Roger, seconded by Jim. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing any, and is there any, is there any objections to the motion? Not seeing any hands in the room or online. The motion passes, but just for clarity, I should have done this first, but for clarity, I'm just going to read the motion. Is to confirm the allocation of $608,000 in conservation rec funding to support the acquisition subject to standard conditions. Motion passes without objection. Thank you. Thanks, Roger.
Project is Beaver Brook in Scarborough. There's this 32-acre acquisition by Scarborough Land Trust. I don't think that should say pre-acquisition. It's community open space in Scarborough with frontage on Beaver Brook and existing snowmobile trail and planned trailhead and hiking trails. The AOC met on January 9th to discuss this project. People, I should not say combined here. I got I gotta up my game on this. Anyway, the appraisals reported a value of 480,000, which was accepted by the committee, and we have a draft motion.
Before I turn to the AOC chairs, or any questions? Seeing any, Bob?
Well, in spite of the fact that we were handicapped without Barbara at this meeting, move to approve the recommendation of the LMF Appraisal Oversight Committee and accept the appraiser's value of $480,000.
Great. Any questions on the motion? Not seeing any online or in the room. Read on the record one last time to approve the recommendation of the AOC and accept the appraised value of $480,000. Is there any objections to this motion? Seeing no objections online or in the room, the motion passes. Back to staff.
Public notice for the Beaver Brook project was advertised in the Kennebec Journal and Press Herald on January 20th. No comments were received, so we have the second draft motion there.
And I will move to confirm the allocation of $162,000 in CNR funding to support the acquisition, subject to standard conditions.
Second that motion.
Motion by Roger, seconded by Jim. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no questions or comments. Read it into the record one last time to confirm the allocation of $162,000 in CNR funding to support the acquisition, subject to standard conditions. Is there any objections to the motion? No objections either in the room or online. The motion passes.
On to Kennebago again. Just to refresh everybody's memory, the yellow parcel on this is what we've been calling the headwaters parcel, which also known as Tract 2. The slightly pinkish grayish parcel to the west of that with all the tributaries in it is what we've been calling the woodlands parcel, that is Tract 1. And so on September 28th of last year, the board resolved all the issues relating to public access and confirmed funding for this project. Because of a closing deadline that they had in their purchase agreement, Ranger Lakes Heritage Trust went ahead and pre-acquired the Tract 1 parcel. Tract 2 had been pre-acquired long ago without using LMF funds, with the intent of being reimbursed, and that was all according to plan. When you all met in November, we administratively merged these into a single project rather than two separate projects, which we were hoped would lead to greater convenience, but turned out not to. At the start of the year, we learned through council that at closing in October, Ranger Lakes Heritage Trust had granted a conservation easement on the woodlands parcel to Forest Society of Maine, which in and of itself, in terms of conservation outcomes, isn't necessarily a problem. That is something that happens periodically on LMF projects, that we fund the fee acquisition and there is a conservation easement as a second layer of protection. In this case, the proposal for the woodlands project mentioned that possibility. We hadn't had a lot of further discussions about it, and this was ultimately granted without our knowledge or opportunity to review it. And the concerns that we have, first of all, is just the general requirement that we need to review any encumbrances on the title to make sure that it's consistent with LMF funding. We also try really hard to have the project agreement recorded before any conservation easements or anything like that, so that we have priority in terms of protecting the state's interest and in terms of having priority if there is any conflict between the project agreement and the conservation easement. And that's how we've done these projects in the past, where there's a conservation easement granted, is we fund the acquisition, we record the project agreement, and the conservation easement, which we have reviewed, is then recorded. So we get in first. And one of the side effects of doing it this way is that by granting the conservation easement, it reduces the value of the property. Without the conservation easement in place, the woodland parcel was worth $4.9 million. With the easement in place, it's worth 2.8 million, and that's the value that the LMF project agreement, the state's interest will attach to. And again, and this is all only on the Woodlands parcel. Tract 2, the Headwaters parcel, is unaffected by any of this, which is why we are now regretting merging them into a single project. But because of the new encumbrance, the change in value, this is a substantial change in these sort of design and scope and value of the project that needs to come back before the LMF board. So after we learned of this, we had a very productive meeting with the Ranger Lakes Heritage Trust, and we mapped out a tentative path forward, subject to the approval of the board. With regard to the Headwaters parcel Tract 2, because none of this affects it, we can immediately proceed to closing. It's pre-acquired, so we would reimburse them $1 million, which was the amount that had been allocated to that project. The reason they want to go forward that without waiting to clear everything up on the Woodlands parcel is because they have another project that does not have LMF funding, but another project that they won't need that money to close on in April. And of course, we all want more conservation to happen, so we are trying to work with them on that front. So that would be the Headwaters parcel. But the Woodlands parcel, like I said, it would need board approval because the value has changed. We need a new appraisal. We also, staff and council need to fully review that conservation easement and be absolutely certain that there is nothing in there that's going to conflict with the purposes of LMF funding. It's doubly important in this case because it does have recording priority over the project agreement. So we need to be very comfortable with everything that's in there. And then once that is done and we have the appraisal, we have the appraisal. We did not get in time to have for this meeting, but we have the appraisal. So we would bring that to the AOC and back to the board to confirm the award. So what we are asking for from the board today is first approval of that immediate release of the $1 million for the Headwaters parcel. And then second, to confirm the board's
$5.
Sorry, sorry.
He's bringing donuts next time.
to confirm the ongoing commitment to this project with the change in configuration, the new conservation easement, the change in value, is to reaffirm that preliminary award on, under current circumstances.
Yeah.
So we have 2 draft motions for the board there.
So in a sense, we're back to where we were, splitting the projects. Yeah.
Yeah. We're looking at whether it may technically stay as a single multi-parcel project in our records, but it's going to be 2 separate project agreements, 2 separate closings, 2 separate awards.
So I can't think of a time when we've ever had a concern with a Forest Society easement. But I mean, have you taken any preliminary looks at these to make sure that they're going to be in line with?
On a preliminary basis, it looks like it's their typical easement,
Yeah.
which we have not had a problem with.
Yeah.
But we need to really go through with a fine-tooth comb. And if there is anything in there that needs further consideration, we would have it back. We would bring it to the board alongside the appraisal.
Yeah, okay, thanks,
Jason,
Jason.
can you go through the initial appraisal and then the reduced appraisal? It's different.
Okay, yeah.
$2 million.
So the original appraisal on Tract 1 was 4.9 million. And the LMF award for that was 750,000. So it worked out to about 85% matching funds. With the appraisal reduced the value of the property by about 40%. The value as encumbered is 2.81 million. So there's still more than enough match to cover the LMF award of 750,000. The match percentage goes from 85 down to 73.
Yeah. Go ahead, Catherine.
Catherine.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for full disclosure, I'm on the board of an executive committee of Forest Society of Maine. So I'm in favor of this, both motions, but I didn't know if you would prefer that I recuse myself from voting.
It's one of those areas where you're not benefiting personally. I think I would leave it up to you on how you would like to proceed, but I think from the standpoint of the board, unless there's objection, I don't see a direct conflict.
Okay, thank you.
Barbara, we see you, Barbara.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I figured out my computer issues. Nice to be with you. I just wanted to commend the staff and the Ranger Lakes Heritage Trust staff for working so expeditiously on this and essentially getting to what I call yes, so that everyone can move ahead. I think it was remarkable that, everything was able to proceed so smoothly here. And I also wanted to commend the Range Lakes Heritage Trust for proceeding with getting public access on the Headwaters parcel. I think that speaks to the trust that we talked about at our meeting when we went ahead with this project initially. And I'm just really pleased to see that that we're very near having public access both now and forever on this parcel.
Great, thank you, Barbara. Any other questions or comments to staff before we move into motion? Not seeing any. Would anybody like to make a motion? Jim?
I move that we approve the release of $1 million in CNR funding for the Kennebago Headwaters parcel.
Second.
Jim got in right under the wire. The motion by Roger, seconded by Judy. Is there any questions or comments on the motion? Not seeing any. So the motion is to approve the release of 1 million in CNR funding for the Kennebago Headwater parcels. Is there any objections to the motion? Seeing no objections either online or in the room, the motion passes. Great. Moving on to the second motion.
I move that we confirm the preliminary award of LMF funding for the Kennebago Woodlands parcel as encumbered by a conservation easement, subject to full staff and legal review of the easement terms and submission of a new appraisal for acceptance by the AOC and LMF board prior to final award.
Great. Any additional thoughts?
Second.
Oh, second. We have a second by Judy. I'm sorry. Jumped on the gun. Do we have any additional thoughts, questions, comments? Seeing any, okay, so read into the record one last time to confirm the preliminary award of the LMF funding for the Kennebago Woodlands parcel as encumbered by the conservation easement, subject to full staff legal review of the easement and terms and the submission of the new appraisal for acceptance by the AOC and the LMF prior to final award. Is there any objections to this motion? Hearing no objections online or in the room, the motion passes. And just to echo Barbara's comments, I think you guys really found a nice way forward here to work through this. Yeah.
I'm just curious of why you went forward with the easement on the Kennebago Woodlands, but not on the Headwaters.
We had a foundation who had pledged $1 million towards tract 1 if we put an easement on it. But at the last minute, they, like a few days before, I got a call saying that they would not bring the money to the table unless we put the easement on it at closing.
Yeah.
We never planned to do that, but under pressure.
Yeah.
So thank you.
$1 million does create a little.
It does. Yeah, it's quite a sequence of events. Really appreciate it. You guys hanging in with us. Not used to being the problem child in any crowd, but doing a pretty good job. So thank you.
Okay. Jim.
We didn't let perfect get in the way of good.
That's right.
I think it's commendable.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a pretty perfect project. done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Okay, moving right along then, we're now going to the Working Waterfront Access Protection Program. And Laura, are you starting or are we?
I am handing it off to her eminence.
Bringing up the brains of
The
DMR.
real brains, exactly.
Good morning, everybody. Deirdre Gilbert, DMR. So basically what we wanted to bring to your attention is that we have done some work to the workbook since our last round in 2022. And I would say prior to mid-January, we thought the changes to the workbook were largely just based on our last round. The department had been supported by both CEI and Melissa Britt from the Coastal Program during that round. They paid really close attention to the parts of the workbook that were confusing to applicants, where we kind of had the same information in multiple places, but like slightly differently. Where were people asking for clarity? They did a pretty thorough review and tried to kind of, streamline what we had and make everything a lot clearer. So that was kind of the first reason for amending the workbook. Related to that, we had a budget worksheet that had been the same since I think the program started in 2006. That was perennially confusing to applicants and not that helpful to us, frankly. So we spent some time trying to just clarify that and reduce it down to kind of like the basic premise of what we need the applicants to provide and understand. And that is really kind of the potential award size, how that relates to match, and then other costs that they will incur prior to closing on the project. So the project budget worksheet is kind of narrowed to those items. Then in mid-January, we had the first of the two coastal storms, and the commissioner had asked basically that we start to think about this program in light of the fact that this might be an obvious avenue for folks who have sustained damage from these storms to try to access funds for rebuilding. And we talked internally quite extensively, and I talked with Laura quite extensively about whether there was any merit in rethinking our scoring criteria. And I think that ultimately we decided not to go in that direction because a lot of what we would be looking at that an applicant would be providing is basically their plans. And that is like fundamentally different than the other scoring criteria, which is basically very much about what the property is like in reality. So just given the challenge associated with scoring somebody on something that they haven't done yet, we decided to go in the direction of amending. We have a list of considerations already that, in addition to the scoring criteria, the review panel can consider. So we added two things to those. So the first one is basically we're asking, to the degree that the applicant can provide this information, if the proposed use of the award monies would be to develop resiliency of the property to the long-term effects of climate change. So all other things being equal, if we had two projects, one that said, I'm just going to rebuild it the same way, and one that said, I'm going to rebuild it, but with an eye toward sea level rise, and it's probably going to be a couple feet higher, and I'm going to consult an engineer, we would give more consideration to the latter. And then secondarily, the other thing that we were a little bit worried about is, again, anticipating that the folks who might apply in this round might be folks who were impacted by those storms, just some ability to consider the fact that when they come to us, their wharf or their operation may have been significantly negatively impacted by those events. So normally we score on the utility of the property, and we were envisioning a situation where that utility had been really compromised. And we just wanted to be able to kind of not just look at what the property is today, but give them the opportunity to explain, here's what we had before those events and what we would like to return to or improve upon. So ultimately, that is where we landed, just adding those two considerations. I would say internally, we have little bit of trepidation about what will happen when we open this program, just knowing that there is now much more demand than there has ever been before for access to these types of funds. So we'll know a little bit more once we announce kind of what the response is, but those are the workbook changes, at least, that we made in anticipation of that.
Okay. Before I make a couple comments, is there any questions around workbook?
But remind me how much money is in this account, like $1 million?
Like 2.1 million, should I? Probably in here. Probably right here.
Yeah, 2.1 and maybe another 100,000 plus.
Oh,
Yeah.
For-
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'll just, I had an opportunity to not only fly, a big area of the coast after the first storm. I have been, up and down the coast after the second storm, looking at the damage. There is, well, I've been told by NEMA to stop putting a price tag on this until they finish doing their work. But there's millions and millions of dollars worth of damage up and down the coast. The Boston Globe article, that focused on Stonington the other day talked about just over $10 million worth of damage. I think that's an underestimate of what
It's gotta be.
yeah, of what I saw, in Stonington. There are areas where, all of the wharfs, Korea Harbor is a great example in Gooseboro. There's 24 wharfs. Every one of them has some level of damage. 6 or 7 of them were gone. 2 of the major wharfs that deal with most of the access, quote, I saw access to bait, access to water, access back to dealers. From a larger perspective, those 2 were basically put out of business for a period of time. And so the sense of urgency, I learned a long time ago not to scoop the boss, but she will be making some announcements tonight around infrastructure needs. And so it's a start. I've had very good conversations with Senator Collins on some near-term, hopefully federal funding, but there needs to be an avenue of which she can attach to some of that to a spending bill, and that doesn't exist right now. Might not exist until March, and then, as we all know, it's an election year with all kinds of drama associated with it. So it's hard to say how that will play out. But I have talked to several people who are now looking at working waterfront. This call for interest will really be telling. I've talked to Laura about, are there other funds available to us internally, that we could potentially have a board discussion on and reallocate. The CNR funds we've basically spent, and what we haven't spent, we have a call for interest that does spend them. So we don't have a lot of flexibility here. Certainly this will be a very big topic of discussion for the next biennial budget, but that's down the road. I'll stop yapping, but I do think we're going to have a lot of interest in this round. I have 2 hands for board members. I've got Barbara and then Kath.
Mr. Chairman, you started to talk about this, and I'm very interested in the synergy between our funds and other funds that may become available for repairing infrastructure damage. And you started to suggest that there would be renewed interest in working with LMF on covenants. Could you just explain that synergy a little bit more and how you see that working together to provide new incentives to, put covenants on their properties?
Yeah, first let me just lay out the scenario that we have in front of us. There's little to no money in the short term to help with these projects, right? There is the disaster formulas at the federal level on the FEMA side are for public infrastructure, not for private businesses. The fisheries disaster money, the laws recently changed basically pushing any disaster from a fishery standpoint that is storm related back over to FEMA. And again, FEMA is not for private businesses. And so we're trying to expeditiously as we can identify funding. And because we're talking about potentially pennies on the dollar for money for helping rebuild, that has, I think, raised the interest of the LMF Working Waterfront program for people who are now like, if I could find a way, even though they may not like the covenant side of this, fact that it could potentially bring 100 or 200,000 or more to the table for a particular piece of property, I think that outweighs the covenant issue that an individual or a business might have had in the past.
Thank you.
Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering if there's going to be any consideration for applicants to detail any insurance monies that might come in, because there will be some that, you know, there will be insurance policies on, whether that also most likely pays pennies on the dollars, but if that's being taken into consideration.
You have an answer, but I don't believe we
We
do.
have not discussed that.
Yeah.
Just based on your conversations with most properties that don't expect to
Yeah.
utilize any kind of.
So anybody who had insurance, most of it was P&I insurance, right? And that's not going to help them with the storm. Very few businesses actually had flood insurance. A few that have had flood insurance are being denied. That is a federal insurance, so it's not something the Maine Board of Insurance will even deal with. That is an appeal through a very different process. But from what I understand from the conversations I've had, there are going to be very few dollars from insurance companies that will be paid out related to Working Waterfront.
Okay, thank you.
Can staff or someone just remind me kind of the timeline for? Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, pending your decision today, we were hoping to basically immediately open this round. In the last two rounds, we've gone through a process of requesting letters of interest first, and that has helped us just, you know, if there's a project that really isn't a good fit, we can let folks know that sooner rather than later and save them the process of developing full application. I think we gave ourselves not much more than a week or two to get back to people, you know, mid-March, basically, on whether or not we were asking them to proceed. And then we would have the full proposals due at the end of June. We would convene the review panel kind of probably late July, early August, and then bring their recommendations to you on September 10th.
And do you think that's fast enough? Or is he gonna?
That schedule is faster than any time that I can recall us running the program. Yeah. And I think because of the due diligence that needs to be done, and because we bring, this is a reminder, it's a different process. The board, we have our own DMR advisory group here that will review the proposals instead of us going through them. But yeah. Barbara, I see your hand up again.
I'm still just interested in this synergy between LMF funds and conserving Working Waterfront and helping them build back better. And of course, we're aware that there is a surplus in our state budget. And again, I don't want to preempt what the governor is going to discuss this evening, but is there a consideration that some of those funds could be awarded to LMF specifically for Working Waterfront?
So Barbara, from a state perspective, we've looked at, this is the supplemental budget that we're dealing with that will be released next week. So we have spent the last week and a half internally talking about the supplemental budget, but also thinking about next steps long-term in the next biennial budget. So because of the time frame it takes to get through a Working Waterfront, the focus is how to get dollars on the ground sooner than this process. with the idea that we would revisit LMF in general, including working waterfront, in the biennial budget. So, we don't expect the supplemental to, well, I know the supplemental won't take up working waterfront in this round.
Thank you.
I think the benefit here of requests for proposals is we'll know what we'll have.
Yep.
And fairly short order. So I think if we go down this road, we can then, you know, maybe we're short a little bit, maybe we're short a lot, but if
So
there's
that
a,
give you good leverage for the biennial, but.
right, and so I think it'll certainly will help with that, and then it will also give us an idea if we do have a little flexibility with shifting a few funds to maybe help cover another project or two, we could make that consideration as board. So, okay.
I meant to mention that March 4th deadline for the letter of interest, we specifically selected that because the Fishermen's Forum is that preceding weekend. And we have a session at the forum on working water. So we just thought that would be a good opportunity to make sure if anybody had any, like, last minute questions before they submitted a letter,
Yeah.
we could speak to them about that.
What is the Fisherman's Forum?
The Fishermen's Forum it's almost like a trade group weekend. So industry from all over, really all over the country will come together, but with a focus on Maine. We do seminars on different issues, and we fill the Samoset for 3 days, and there's a lot of libations.
Fishermen, go figure.
Almost 50 years.
Yeah, that next year is the 50th anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So do you need a motion to?
Next slide.
Okay, I'll move to accept the WWAPP, because I can't remember what that acronym stands for, workbook dated January 20, working waterfront, something or other. Dated January 2024 and issue a round 12 WAP call.
We have a second. Second by Roger. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, I'll read into the record. This is a motion to adopt the WAP workbook dated January 2024 and issue a round 12 WAP call for proposals. Is there any objections to this motion? Seeing no objections online or in the room, the motion passes. Great, thank you very much.
Definitely Italian slander.
Not meant, as that was not.
Working waterfront access
Yeah.
protection program is
Yes,
wonderful.
the Italian beside me did not. react any differently, so.
Can I just ask a question about the working waterfront?
Sure.
Move on.
Is there any sense of how well the LMF working waterfront projects fared in the storm? I know there was, a lot of them got a lot of money and invested in the infrastructure. That infrastructure do
Yeah.
any better?
So there's probably two that I can call out, and Deidre may have more examples, but Tennant's Harbor, which was one that was done recently, and which is right there.
Yeah, about that.
The way they redid that wharf, with the money that we gave them, they reinvested. First of all, let's just all remember that they don't have to reinvest this money in their wharf, right? We bought a covenant from them and they're not required to. Most of them do. And this is Tennant's Harbor is a great example. There were wharfs, on both sides of this one that were damaged or gone. This one looks just like it did before the storm. Port Clyde is one which is done a little bit different. They did have damage. They took their pier and they capped it with concrete. The buildings, the structure itself on top with that type of an approach, knowing that this facility would get wet, held up really well. Problem is this time, the last December 24 and then the two in December 8, whatever, the December storm, whatever one that day that was, and these two storms actually undermined the facility. So I think they've learned how they would have to build back, but overall the facility withstood a very big blow. What we are seeing, actually, Deidre, do you think of any others from working waterfront perspective that have invested? Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Stonington at all?
Oh, Stonington, great. So Stonington, they have two facilities. The one they invested in looks just like it did before the storms. The one that was a pier that they hadn't invested in, is condemned. So it's just a great example of that investment in building for resiliency.
Have we got any, has there been any publicity on that? To me, that's a wonderful public
Yes, so-
announcement or a great little piece to tie this together.
Yeah, we haven't done any, honestly, we've been looking for other funding and relief programs that we haven't gone through to spend a lot of time thinking about how those dollars are invested and what kind of,
That's
how they
amazing.
benefit. Another example, I mean, not working waterfront, but the culvert program in the state run between the natural resource agencies, right? I mean, that where we've invested
Yep.
in the process and then seeing that process put in place, those culverts are still right there, no problem. Bank full with plus, bottomless, I mean, the water goes through. But then you look at places like around Sunday River where those culverts were not replaced, right? And they couldn't handle that volume. And we saw that type of destruction. So we can clearly show where we build for resiliency in mind that it works. And I think we can show that on the working waterfront as well. What we are seeing now, DEP is ahead of the game. They have a bill in front of the legislature right now that deals with permitting and permit by rule to make it easier to build up. Right, and they actually put that bill in before the storms, right, thinking ahead. And we've worked closely with them about changing the language. Instead of saying go up 2 feet, it's 4 feet from base flood levels, so they can even go a little bit higher. But what we're hearing now is everybody wants to start building not with piers and pilings, but with concrete and fill. Those are the facilities that were not damaged. Right, so I think we've learned a lot from that standpoint. Okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, moving right along, to item number 9, access improvement capital, farm capital improvement grants. Jason?
Yes, so we do this every year, but as always, I'll remind everybody that by statute, after a LMF project closes, the board may award up to 5% of the appraised value of that property for access improvements. Each year, the board votes to establish the award amount and authorize all the projects that closed during the previous year to apply. The amount that the board has previously discussed was 5% of the first $200,000 in appraised value, then 2% of appraised value of over $200,000, be a maximum award of $25,000. The reason behind that structure was to get as much money as possible to smaller projects so that they had a meaningful amount, but also to taper out the awards off and put a cap on it so that large projects didn't suck up all the available money and make it not be available for funding actual land purchases. And normally I have a table on this slide that shows all the projects that closed in the previous year. Because there were 16 CNR and water access projects, the table would not fit on the slide. So I can tell you that the total amounts of those projects were a little bit over 6.5 million in LMF awards, and appraised value was almost 19 million. So with that amount that was on the previous slide, the total access improvement award eligibility would be a little bit under 300,000. But we have a draft motion here to authorize those projects to apply for access improvement money.
I move we authorize CNR and water access projects that closed in 2023 to apply for access improvement grants in an amount up to 5% of the first $200,000 in appraised value, then 2% of appraised value over $200,000 to a maximum award of $25,000.
By Jim, we have a second?
Second.
excuse me, motion by Roger, seconded by Jim. I was projecting the flu. Are there any questions? Barbara?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, we're using that same formula, of course, for our stewardship awards. And I just wondered if you could tell us how much was awarded for stewardship during the 2023 for these projects.
Well, we have not made any awards for stewardship because there is a reason for that. But first of all, the board didn't fully adopt the policy on making those awards until like last fall. And because of where we are with the rulemaking, we will now have to invite all the projects that have closed since 2021 to come back and have some application process for that. And we are waiting for the board to go through the rulemaking process so that there is no confusion about those awards.
Okay, so that would be done in this year, that we would reach back to, you're saying 3 years of projects?
The stewardship awards were first authorized by statute. They weren't in 2021. Until then, we couldn't do that at all. And since round 10, round 11, and now round 12, we have been promising applicants. And once we figure out how to do this, you'll be able to apply for this money.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very, very close to figuring it out.
Okay, and potentially, do you know how much money we should be setting aside for that?
The money is already in the 15% set asides that Laura mentioned when talking about fund balances. The money has been set aside. Okay, and do we have an amount specific for the stewardship awards potentially? We don't, because we set aside 5% of the LMF award. Okay. Which is not the same as what the actual, it is an approximation that we are able to use to make the math easy when we're doing the set asides. And we'd also know that not every project will apply for those funds. So we have the money set aside, and when we give people the opportunity to ask for it, we will see how much they ask for, but the money is there. Okay, good. Thanks for the update.
You have those set aside from 2021.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All set aside at that sort of maximum 5% of the award.
Yeah.
So that isn't gonna take away from our available.
Yeah, it should not.
Okay, any other questions? Motion by Roger, seconded by Jim. Motion is to authorize CNR and water access projects that closed in 23 to apply for access improvement grants in the amount of up to 5% of the first 200,000 in appraised value, then 2% of the appraised value over 200,000 with a maximum of 25,000. Is there any objections to the motion? Seeing and hearing no objections in the room or online, the motion passes. Great, thank you. And that moves us.
One more thing, sorry.
Oh, farmland, sorry.
Very similar to access improvements, but separate, is when we close on a farmland project, the board may displaying or capital improvements on that farmland. Again, the statutory maximum is 5% of appraised value. I had this conversation with Michelle Webb at Bureau of Ag for the same reasons that we use this award structure for stewardship and access improvements. She supports the same sort of scaling structure for these farm awards. So we have one farm project that closed in 2023, New Leaf Farm, which had an appraised value of $270,000 and would be eligible for $11,000. But I've struck the draft motion is written in a more general sense, only partly because I copied it from the previous slide, but also to be a template for how these awards can be made in the future, and also if I discover any math errors, I'm covered.
Okay. Any questions for Jason? Mac?
To what extent is this proposed award linked to enhancing the public values associated with these farmlands? The language I see and makes me think it could be and end up really just focused on the private values associated with the farmland more than the public resources.
The intent is to support the viability of the farm as a ongoing agricultural business, which is also the purpose of the funding, and the primary public benefit that's being sought with these funds is the preservation of working farms in Maine. So it's not necessarily looking at anything that would be, a public benefit as you would see on a conservation and recreation project. I mean, it's not aimed at public access or habitat or anything like that. It is aimed at what the needs of the farm are. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's clear.
Thanks, Mac. Any other questions for Jason? Not seeing anybody with any questions. Anybody like to make a motion?
I move we authorize working farmland projects to close in 2023 to apply for farmland improvement grants in an amount up to 5% of the first 200,000 in appraised value, then 2% of appraised value over 200,000 to a maximum award of $25,000.
Second that motion.
Thank you. Motion by Roger, seconded by Jim. Any questions on the motion? Not seeing any. The motion is to authorize working farmland projects that close in 2023 to apply for farmland improvement grants in an amount of up to 5% of the first 200,000 in appraised value, then 2% of the appraised value over 200,000 to a maximum award of 25,000. Is there any objections to the motion? Seeing or hearing no objections either in the room or online, the motion passes. Great. We are cranking along. I want to look at staff before I say, let's move to the next. No. Okay. All right. Item number 10, round 12 project inquiries.
Yeah, well, you can see we have 20 projects. These are the total requests. If all of these project inquiries turn into proposals, this is what would be requested. You can see the expected match, just under 8 million.
Wait, it's pretty close to what we have.
It is amazing, actually, like bang. And in fact, we probably do, we do have it because we have that extra 300,000 in interest at least. So, yeah. And you see the acres and how well distributed it is across the state of Maine. Those are the inquiries.
Great.
Yeah.
Any questions around the inquiries? Seeing any, then let's move right along to staff update.
Making update. Okay, this is my fun. Okay. Last meeting, you saw this slide and you approved the issuance of rules based upon what you had. We subsequently met with our AAG, Lauren Parker, who said, no, those were not rules.
That happens so often.
That happens. I'm so glad to hear that. She said that those aren't rules. And also she suggested that we go through our workbook and locate every place we say the word must or shall, which we have done. I have done that, and create a matrix, because she said those are rule type like language. That's kind of, you're setting yourself up. So I've completed that part. The long story, the short end is that we won't have rules back for you to approve until the March meeting. But so you know, it's not just a dog ate my homework kind of a story. We are really in process. I have created that matrix. I have 3 columns next to each occurrence of must or shall. Is it in the statute? In which case you're fine. Should it be in a rule? If it's not, it needs to be in a rule if we want to keep it, or do we want to reframe how we say that? And the goal, I think, my goal is actually to then bring back to you the matrix showing these various decision points in our workbook. It won't be like millions of them. There are lots of occurrences with must and shall, but we'll be able to group them. And then you'll be able to decide, okay, do we really want this to be a rule, or do we want to actually approach this a little differently? My unsolicited advice is to create as few rules as possible. Don't tie your hands unnecessarily. Back to that chart I showed you before, you were appointed by the governor for your judgment and knowledge. hold on to that ability to use some of that from time to time as you can. And so this is the path that using a full shout out to Tim Bokaj over at Lupsy for lending me his tools and tutoring me a little bit on this whole rulemaking thing. He's kind of a wizard. You plug in, this is when we'd expect you to then have rules back to approve or have that discussion with that, decide what do you want to have issue. And then trying to hit every public hearing be an existing board meeting, so there's nothing sort of out of the ordinary. Then I expect we could be done with this at your board meeting on June 25th, where we would then begin to, and this is with a public hearing. Lauren gave us the option, you can skip a public hearing, but if there's like anything, then you have to start over from the beginning. And it really did seem like just planning it out this way would make the most sense. And then, any questions about that? About this?
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch.
Oh, boy.
I think from a rulemaking standpoint, right, we have, as a board and as an organization, have gone along for many years without rules, until this recent statute change came into place saying we needed to promulgate. So I think as we go through the workbook, our goal should be to ensure that we're developing a workbook that doesn't need rule changes every time we want to make changes to the rule book. So I think that hopefully is our collective goal here as we're moving forward.
Can that actually be accomplished?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it can. I think there may be, and just to the thought for staff, as you're looking at the statutes, sometimes it's good to create clarity with rules based on what how the statute talks about and how our policies are for implementing those statutes. So I think that may be something you could look at and then wouldn't need to change all the time.
Yeah.
The one pause that I have is public hearings at an LMF board meeting.
Okay.
Right. And that means we're going to be here potentially for a fair amount of time, right? Usually what I would suggest is you separate the public hearing from the board meeting, because then you're going to have a public comment period that will last past that board meeting.
Okay.
And then the board would then meet for final action.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And I think I picked up on the periphery. It doesn't have to be the full board at these public.
Doesn't need to be any of us.
Yeah. Okay. So that gives a great deal more flexibility, which means the timeline.
There does need to be a appointed person there, though.
What's that?
There does need to be an appointed person there.
Yeah, that could be staff though, right? I mean, I think.
Yikes.
Okay. It's gotta be appointed by the governor.
Yeah,
I think
we
that's
just,
right.
it's probably different for every agency, but ours is simply identifying who that person is in the rule, in the proposed rule. So, but
Okay.
we can figure that piece out.
Yeah.
I
Okay. that's really
nominate
good.
Barbara.
In anticipation of that, Barbara, she has not to object.
He's saying, no, he's accepting.
Barbara,
You can see if you're not at the meeting what happens. But I just wanted to agree with you, Commissioner, that, we want to create as much flexibility for ourselves as possible and not tie our hands with shells and must. And I just wonder, Laura, if when you make your charts, because you're sort of the master of the chart process, can you just maybe annotate it in some way so that, we understand that we're not losing anything, if you will, by the removal of the shall and the must, that we're already, covered, if that's the right word, in our ability to move ahead with, our workbook and so forth.
I will absolutely annotate.
Mhm.
Annotate. Grammatically correctly, hopefully. Annotate. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Barbara. Any other thoughts, questions to Laura on rulemaking? Okay, great. Moving right along then.
Moving right along, cooking with gas. And this carries over the public access memo. This is why we had a brief discussion at the end of, during the last meeting. And Barbara, I remember you saying you really wanted to have more stakeholders. You wanted to look at this issue. We have, you've subsequently seen this public access memo written by a very eminent group of our partners. I would love to postpone discussion on this so that it occurs. I don't like things piecemeal very much. And this is going to be one of those things that shows up on that grid. This is definitely going to be one of the things that appears in March. Yeah, yeah, because this is definitely among those sort of things. So I for that reason, I was hoping that we didn't have an in-depth conversation today. Is that okay to say?
It is. I mean, I think based on the last conversation we had about public assets, I think the board was pretty much in unison, and I thought as far as needing to have that broader conversation. We did all receive a public access memo from some of our partners, gave us some food for thought, and I think we need to take and build on that in our thinking and pull together a standalone meeting just on that.
Good. And then other staff updates. Congratulations, IFW and Flora.
No.
I know. No, you didn't know? Oh, geez, it's been my source of grief. And of course, so happy for you. Rings a little hollow, right?
I love working here so much. I'm excited about the next one.
Yes, and I am glad that we'll still see you.
Yeah.
Definitely moving from that seat.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And apropos of that, we have senior planner job postings not closing till coincidentally February 5th. Please spread the word. Please spread the word. Your lives are better when our lives are better. You know, get good, really good people in here. And yeah, thank you. And that is all the staff updates that I have.
I just want to throw some kudos at Flora. She, as you all know, she worked for the department for many years. And then came here and continued to show her great value, and will do the same for IFW. So we hate to see you go, but we're glad you're still in this world and will help give us guidance. So congratulations. There you go.
There you go.
Okay, anything else? Next board meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, just while we're on the AOC meeting, thinking about that, I mean, we've got one board member returning off. We've got one member who would like to step back. I know we need to continue to think about the AOC and its makeup. I know the governor's office is making some considerations around appointments for what I assume will be this session as well. And I continue to push the AOC skill set as needing to be part of that conversation. So hopefully, I think Commissioner Beal and Camuso and I are going to need to beat up on Tom Abello if we sure. Barbara, your hand is up.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just a request for our next meeting. You mentioned it earlier, and I just want to mention it again now. I'm very interested in the interest that our funds are receiving and the investment options that we may have. You know, every quarter when we leave it in the same old place, we're losing money. So I'd like to see if we could put that on the agenda for our March meeting.
Yeah, I think we can certainly do an update on the interest rates. We give more detail on that, but the ability to invest it differently, I think, is going to be a statutory change that we'll have to take up in the next section. So we'll continue to talk about that at the administration's level, and hopefully our partners will push a few of the right people, Tom, to think about it.
Yeah, good. I think that's important to be ready if it requires a legislative change. And then, Laura, could you just send out the memo to all of us again that we'll be discussing on public access?
Sure. The one, did you get the memo with your board packet?
I don't think I did.
Oh, you were supposed to have gotten it. I
Okay.
certainly,
Right at the bottom.
oh, Bob says it's right at the bottom. But the memo itself is actually, it's actually there, right? Yeah, it's attachment J.
It's attachment J? Okay. Okay, I'll take another
I'll
look.
send it to you again if you don't have it. Let me know.
All right. Good, thank you.
Ma'am.
Okay. I don't think there's any other business to be brought before the board, so motion to adjourn is in order.
So move. Second.
Don't have to argue about that. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
This is gonna be a much longer meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna get the episodes very late.